Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we're going to be talking a little bit about a new interview Chris CHIBNALL was recently on. The link will be in the description for the original podcast if you wanted to give it a listen, but the reason I wanted to talk about it today was because he says a few interesting things about his era and I just kind of wanted to give my takes on them. This is by no means like an attack piece on the guy. By all intents and purposes, in this podcast and in others, he seems like a really nice guy. But I do think that some of the way he answers these questions is somewhat indicative of the way he approached Doctor Who and his era, and I just wanted to kind of get into them, really. But before we get into it, if you could do me a teeny tiny little favour and click that subscribe button, it'd be very much appreciated. We are trying to get to 21,000 subscribers by the end of this month, and we are just over 200 subscribers away, so if you enjoy regular Doctor Who content, feel free to subscribe. That would be ever so much appreciated. But with that said, let's get into it. So something that I don't quite agree with is the idea of surprises within his era, and that surprises are the point of storytelling. I'll play the clip here.
You know, I love being surprised.
Well, I think that's the point of storytelling, isn't it? Yeah. It's like if somebody's told you a bit of the story before, if you were down the pub and somebody sort of at the start goes, this story's about to tell you, there's a bit in the middle, where this happens, you're like,
well, that's going to happen.
Why don't we just, let him tell it?
But now, as I said before the clip, I said that I didn't fully agree with his reasoning here, and to be honest, I don't. Mainly because I feel that if the point of your story is surprises, I feel that that can somewhat make for shallow storytelling. Surprises should not be the point of your story, they should be the payoff or catharsis for the audience. They should not be the point behind your story, in my opinion. Because I think then your story can be quite shallow, and it's almost a little bit reductive in a sense to base a story purely around a surprise. And I think we kind of see that with stories like Fugitive of the Doom, where the core premise of them isn't really what happens in the episode in and of itself, but rather what revelation is going to come out as a result. But rather, oh my god, look at this surprise reveal that just happened. The next thing he speaks about is the marketing approach in his era, essentially saying that it was deliberately kept locked down because he prefers not to spoil things. And actually, when he goes on to talk about the RTD2 era, he explicitly states he told Russell, don't tell me anything because I don't want to know. So he seems to approach media very much from a sort of non-spoilery perspective. I'll play that clip here.
And I'm slightly outside it.
Yeah.
So certainly my predilection coming in was like, well, let's keep it as locked down as possible. And also I think that was I was habitually in that thing from doing Broadchurch as well. Yeah. But also Broadchurch had proved you can do it.
Yeah. It is possible in this day and age.
You just don't tell people. Yeah. I mean, it's like genuinely.
Just don't tell anyone.
But that's really hard in a massive organisation, particularly on Doctor Who, because obviously everybody needs to know to make the show.
So this one was somewhat cathartic for me to hear, because I've been told for years that the marketing under the CHIBNALL era was just the same as any other era, and this is directly from the man himself saying that no, actually, the marketing was deliberately different because he prefers secrecy. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with preferring secrecy. I know some people do genuinely prefer that approach. I'm not one of those people. Personally, I found the secrecy to be a bit too over the top in the Chris CHIBNALL era. Like, I get it with big reveals and stuff, 100%. I do think there are cases where spoilers go too far, like Johnson's reveal in Series 10, right? However, I do think when it comes to things like episode titles or release dates or things like that, I don't really feel the secrecy is as necessary there. And I would argue, for me, that the secrecy was a little bit overzealous. However, he does say that he completely understands the other way of doing it, and that's also a valid way of doing it, i.e., which is more the Russell T Davies approach of, here's these big things and making a big show out of it. So but it was really nice to have that outwardly confirmed by the man, because I felt like I was going crazy for years saying that it was different. Next, he talks about the idea of wanting Doctor Who to be better each time, and he explicitly states that he thinks RTD2 will be better than what he made.
Ignore that, and also, so in terms of inclusion, in terms of production, levels, in terms of what we were competing with.
The show never looked better.
Well, I'm sure it's just about to. Which is great. Because it's all, you always want
everything evolves.
But as a Doctor Who fan, what you always want is you want the next one to be even better. And so that's what I feel about the next one. Now I'm like, great, I know it's going to look better than what we've done. I am so excited about that. But I think coming in, it was a sense of, what are you going to do with it? Why are you still making Doctor Who, other than that they're still making Doctor Who?
And if there's one thing I could say about Chris in this interview, I do appreciate how humble he is in this regard, because, let's face it, we all know that this era hasn't exactly been the most universally beloved era of Doctor Who. I'm one of those people who is quite critical of it. But just for him to come out and say that he thinks that Russell's will probably be better than his, I mean, that takes a lot to admit. And fair play to him for saying that, you know, and I think that's a very nice thing for him to say for the incoming team. Somewhat bizarrely, he says he wanted to do a Saranga sequel, Saranga Conundrum, and he was going to call it The Patings, presumably based on Alien to Aliens.
Isn't it? And,
yeah. So I think, I love the Pating. And also there's a good heritage of those, in the show. So it's not like, again...
It's not how they all know.
That's a close cousin of the adipose, isn't it? And
other
things, so it's like... you're always... I can't remember the question. What was the question?
It was just a lot. My kids love the Pating, and I quite often... comment on, I love that little shit, It's mischievous.
We were going to do a sequel, and we couldn't quite get to do it for a couple of reasons. And I would have loved that. I would have loved it, and I would have called it Patings, and it would have been like loads of Patings, and we had it all worked out, and we couldn't do it for one reason or another.
Quite frankly, I'm kind of glad this one didn't happen, as I was never a big fan of that original Saranga Conundrum story, and the Pating in particular, I never really liked as a villain, so yeah, maybe that was for the best. He also talks about how in a scene between 13 and Carvanista during Flux, he was very tempted to put in a line from Carvanista about how the Doctor has apparently named a dog after him, K9, Carvanista 9. So as presumably in this draft, Carvanista's full name was Carvanista 9. Again, it's one of those things I'm glad was cut, because it wouldn't even really make sense. The Doctor didn't name K9. It wasn't the Doctor's creation. So, yeah, bit of a bizarre cut, but there we are. But then we have the biggest quote in this. He talks about how his era is, to him, about family. That's the core theme. And I'll play the clip here, but there's something I want to talk about explicitly with this clip.
Also, thematically, that was very important. Like, I was just... For the era to be about family and different versions of family, I had a sense of what I wanted to do with the Doctor, so it's like everything revolves around that central idea of family. And because it's a show that is designed for the whole family, it's never really been about family.
No,
it's never really explicitly been about family, and that's what the 13th Doctor era is different versions of family, and then what family means to the Doctor is completely disrupted. So that's the sort of purpose of it.
So I don't know whether you caught it, but he says here that the Doctor Who show has never really been about family before. Now this clip confuses me somewhat, because both the RTD1 and early Moffat era have very heavy family themes. Both with David Tennant kind of becoming more domestic and family involved, going to Christmas dinner and that sort of stuff, and with Matt Smith's Doctor quite literally becoming the son-in-law to Amy and Rory, and River being the daughter of Amy and Rory. It's very clearly played like a family dynamic between those four across that era, so I'm not really sure where this idea that Doctor Who's never really been about families come from. Finally, there's just a couple of little things, like for example, the cut monster in It Takes You Away was apparently called the Spindle Man, and they also wanted to do a pirate episode for a while, but the Sea Devils were very last minute, and apparently they had difficulty with the prosthetics and visual effects on the Sea Devils, which was something that was speculated about for a long time. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to talk about here. I'll be honest, it was a really interesting listen, and as I'll say, I'll leave a link in the description below. Though me and the hosts seem to have wholly different opinions, it did offer some interesting insights, so I'll leave it in the description. And without them, I wouldn't have a video to make. So thank you for that. And yeah, let me know in the comments below what you guys think about any of the things that Chris Chibnall said, or any of your opinions on what Chris Chibnall said. Please like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.